All right, so now how do we take what we have learned over the last couple days about HS and how do we apply that as an influencer to become an influencer advocate? And again, has anybody come up with a cute name for that? Because I don't, I'm still at a loss. Yeah, like we need to somehow meld that together and make it a cute name.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Advertising and then look. So
Yeah.
think on it and let me know if you come up with something clever. Influ advocate. In influenza advocate. Yeah. So let's figure out how we take all of that and apply it to what you guys are doing, which first of all, I want to commend you because you're here because of what you're doing, because you're talking about your own journey. And that is bringing people to you and light and awareness to HS. And each of you do that in a very different way. And that is commendable. And I am very, very proud of you all for having the courage to speak out about your HS on your platforms. And this is exactly the kind of awareness that we need to happen, and it needs to come organically. And the thought behind having this workshop was where are people getting their information? And how do we reach the most number of people possible? And that's through you guys and your following. Um, so again, I know there was a ton of information yesterday. So we're going to go through kind of how do you apply that? What does that look like? So we've all heard like, well, at least people are talking about HS, right? And so any awareness is good awareness. No, because there's a lot of awareness that's happening, and I'm sure you guys have seen it. And some of you may be even talking about awareness that's actually moving us backwards without even knowing that. And so I just want to make sure that it's clear it's no one's fault. All of this information comes from what you consider valid sources doctors, Google, which, um, Dr. Google's, that's actually on a slide, don't you worry. So I'm not faulting anyone for where they're getting their information or where they're sharing it. That's why we're here, so that we can talk about where do you get factual, good resources. And honestly, I'm gonna toot my own horn here. It's HS Connect. Yes, you can't even trust what's on the AAD's website. You can't trust what's on Mayo's website, Mayo Clinic, who's like, supposedly huge number one. Their information is inaccurate. It still calls it a sweat gland disease. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So there is a lot of work to be done, including the American Academy of Dermatology. It's inaccurate, and that is not helpful. So this is what happens and why we're here to start making our voices drown out the inaccurate information. And that's going to take all of us. So, no, not all awareness is good awareness. It's not yay because they're talking about it. It's are we passing on accurate information to move HS forward? We have a lot of years to reverse, and it takes a lot of work. So, the first thing I want to talk about is that language matters. So, we know that in social listening, the most commonly used term is boils because people know and can identify what a boil is. But what we have are not boils. Boils have their very own definition medically. So what we have are abscesses. So because we know that there's social listening and that most people can identify with a boil, we chose to go with boil-like abscesses because then you're bringing both pieces of it in. Because if you go to a doctor and say that you have boils, they're going to look at it as an isolated incident. And again, it has its own medical definition. But if you say, like, you have recurrent boil like abscesses, instantly something clicks for them that it's a different thing. So we've kind of merged the two worlds together. And the best way to do that is boil like abscesses. People still get a visual, but you're moving it in the correct direction. Um, we talked a lot yesterday kind of about the stigmatization of HS and these specific things affecting women, age, most common areas, and African American females being the most predominantly affected. And kind of like Dr. Dave Louis said yesterday, we move HS backwards because do any of these things help someone get a diagnosis? If you said, oh, it affects women more than men, would that as a woman make you think that you had HS? Would it make a man think they had HS? In fact, it would make a man think they didn't have HS. Same thing, like, most common areas. We get stuck in this rut of constantly saying armpits, groin, buttocks. Okay, yes, it most commonly affects there, but think about all the people you're isolating when you're saying those things over and over and over. What about all the people who get it on their back? What about the people who get it in other places? Face, but neck, but won't seek care because this does not fit their profile. So that's why we've gone with the anyone, anytime, anywhere. Let's just get rid of all of this stuff because if our goal is to get people to diagnosis with HS, none of this helps. None of it does. So we've switched it in a way of talking about different things. So here's how we've kind of phrased it as far as affecting women 3 to 1. So what we don't want to do is negate the facts that we have so far. But what we do know is those facts are not accurate. We are getting more and more accurate data that's coming out. But right now, the answer, like Dr. Dave Louie had on his slides yesterday, the truth is we don't really know. And some of that is because we keep talking about these things in a way that isolates people. So they aren't standing up and being counted. They aren't coming forward. They aren't seeking the care that they need or deserve because we're making it so. So that's our job here today and going forward is to change that, is to be inclusive, to make sure that everyone knows that they're susceptible to getting HS at any point in time. Like Caitlin said, she was 6 years old. She can't remember a time in her life without HS. And that's happening and we're finding out more and more. And as I'm sure you guys know with sharing your journeys, the more you do that, the more people come forward that are like, oh my God, I have this. Oh my God, I have this. So they think it's 1 in 100 people at least. I think it's higher. Especially just with my stepdaughter Hannah has HS, right? So her boyfriend has HS, his dad had HS, her grandpa has HS, her mom has HS. No one started talking about it until Hannah started talking about it. Yeah. So these are the kinds of things that we're bringing forward and we're bringing to light just by having conversations. And you would be amazed when I came out about my HS at work, there were 2 other people in my office that had HS. It was a small office.
My childhood.
Yeah.
I have it in my book and has it in my husband. So many people.
Yes. So I think that the numbers that we have are really low right now, and I think it's more. But even if you took the 1% would be 1 in 100 people. Think about that when you get on your plane. You're not the only one sitting on that plane with HS. Think about that in Costco. Think about that at the grocery store. Yes.
So the rule of thumb is don't talk about
I love Costco.
So don't talk about HS in absolutes for the most part.
Yes.
Absolute. There are no absolutes.
There are no absolutes. Exactly.
Way to practice our verbiage.
Yeah. And that's what I wanted to try to provide with some of this verbiage. And I can share the slides with you guys too. Yeah. Yeah, not a problem. But talking about it, that HS appears to affect more women than men. We know that men also suffer from HS, but are less likely to speak out. So now we're taking that focus even as a woman, talking about their HS, knowing and acknowledging that men also suffer so that they feel included as well. And then happens during puberty. Again, it can happen at any time in life, from childhood to adolescence to older ages, including post-menopause. And like Dr. Dave Louie said yesterday, there are studies that have come out, one recently by Dr. Syed, who Reese's, and that said that if men get HS later in life, it comes on harder and faster and is more severe than other people. So again, if we just keep talking about how it's a woman's disease, how are these men who come on, in their 30s or 40s, how are they affected? So we have to think about that, and it's not something that's really been done, and that's what we're here to shake up. Only discussing the most common areas again. So Dr. Dave Louie had mentioned this yesterday, but I flip it. I don't do the but. I do it can happen anywhere because people typically hear the first thing you say. They lose it after the but. So I flipped it, and we do HS can happen anywhere on the body. There's a hair follicle, which means, and you don't have to include all of this part because it gets a little technical, but anywhere other than the palms of your hands, soles of your feet, and the red part of your lips. But HS most commonly impacts these areas. So this is an afterthought, but the whole original thought is that it can impact anywhere. And I think that you were capturing the most important part of it first, And then the whole, like, yeah, it most commonly likes these areas. And then African American females, again, this is not to take away that this potentially is absolutely true. Again, we don't truly know right now. We do know that the most people who participate in surveys and studies are your white middle aged women. So we have to start seeing all of the skin of color show up, participate, raise your hand, encourage your communities to do the same. Because without that, we're going to get nowhere and we won't get any accurate information. So we say some research suggests that African American females are more likely to have HS. However, more studies are needed. And that's happening currently. So we should, be getting some more data out soon within the next, I'd say, year or so. And everything takes a really long time. So using your influence to advocate, adding a bigger picture to your story. So you're sharing your journey, but how can you take that journey and make sure that other people can feel included in what you're going through? And I know, especially for the guys, it makes it hard because it's not super popular amongst men. And I think there's such an undercurrent of masculinity that makes it so that you're not able to be hurt or chronically ill unless you have some other condition that's societally acceptable, right? And so that is really difficult. And I commend you guys truly for sharing your stories and being so brave to do that on social media. So figuring out, how do you add these things into your story? How do you, just from your perspective, how do you do that? And then how do you, or sharing surveys, studies, and clinical trials. So this is so important because this is how we get these people counted and everybody shows up and everybody gets a voice and a vote, is by doing these things. So if everyone's okay with it, I'd love to be able to,
With the surveys and stuff, would you be able to send me more like a here in Canada? Because like even the rare Asian voice, I never share them because like maybe 1 in 100 Canadians. Like they're always reaching out to me and I'm like, I'm Canadian. I can't do any of these.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really a problem because the US does far more surveys than anyone else.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm the only one I have found.
Yes. Yeah. And so what, because I have people approach us all the time about that, and it's like you have to, most of it is driven by like physicians
Okay.
or investigators who want to get that information. So I'm hoping that as the awareness about HS grows, that more people are going to start coming out. We do post if they're available to take like worldwide or if there's any geographic restrictions. We do post that on our site, but yes, I totally agree. It's the same thing for the UK. They get hardly any involvement in surveys or studies too. Yeah, it's a problem. And then the US, we get like survey fatigue because we're answering the same thing all the time.
Yeah.
Which we're trying to work on. Like, you guys, this data is out there. Go get it from somebody else. So I would love to include all of you guys in emails that we have of like surveys, studies, that kind of thing, so that you can disseminate that, including like our the posts that we make. I can include that in an email for you and attach it if you want to share that. So, and like kind of Mike had said too, as far as the clinicaltrials.gov, what we do with our clinical trials when we're working with pharmaceutical companies to recruit is we have a web page that they come to on HS Connect that we have curated and worked with them on, that clearly tells them the inclusion criteria. Can you qualify for this study? Can you not? If you have these other issues, you can't. And then what the expectations are, and then how to contact them. So what we're trying to do is to make people feel comfortable in giving them as much information up front as possible before you reach out to the pharma company to then continue on with the potential process of becoming a part of that study. Because we know that you kind of feel like when you go to their site and you sign up, it's like the telemarketers are going to start calling. And so we're trying to really make sure that you can decide up front if this is something that'll work for you or not. So we do that very specifically for intentional reasons, to make sure that we're trying to give as much info as we can. And then leading followers to factual info, such as HS Connect. Again, we can't trust a lot of resources as much as we've been told to trust those resources in our lifetime. It's just not the case. And then to spread facts and awareness, and I know, Sid, we've talked about this because you've had to correct people, which can be difficult sometimes. But this is where you're armed with the accurate information. It's okay to go to someone and say, that's not correct.
And even in like your own comment section of your lives, guys, if I it happens a lot on my page and when I'm live streaming or in a video that goes viral, people with HS in your community are gonna start popping up in the comments and they talk in absolute everybody, you have to take Sacred, you have to take history, you have to like be on march or eat raisins every day.
Yeah.
And it's not the game, if your answer to them is gonna help other people than not, because you know how it is, people will take that shit and run with it.
Yes.
Like, I eat raisins every day. And people, they can get a little whatever, an attitude, you know, I hear it all the time. But like, it is really important to like, you have to moderate your own community.
Yes.
Period. It's so important.
Also, I'm maybe just speaking for myself, also yourself. I have learned how much I have been spreading, even things that I thought it was true. Based upon those two sources that shouldn't be reliable.
Yeah.
Yesterday in the morning, I had to go to my Instagram bio and was like, oh no, this is wrong. My bio had information that wasn't correct. So like, it's okay too.
Yeah.
We learned something and we have to change.
And yes, and that I think we had a good example of that after like the original Beautify HS project where Mahala was like, I can't believe I've been spreading this inaccurate information the whole time. And she went on and made a video and said, you guys, I've been wrong the whole time. I didn't know this. I didn't know any better. And now I do. So now I want to do better.
All you're gonna see from me for the next week is
That's something about like surgery, they say it's a sweat gland removal, so I was saying it's a sweat gland removal, but now I'm knowing that that's not even a thing, because they just talked about that yesterday.
Yep.
That's not a thing. So, it's nice to have that information as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where this education and information comes in. Because like I said, it's no one's fault. It's not your fault. You're spreading the information you've been given by someone you trust. And that's the hardest part about this whole disease is that there are so many facets to it and there's so much misinformation. And part of it is that we're spreading that misinformation without even knowing we're doing that, you know?
If you knew better, you would do better.
Yeah.
So when you know better, you do better.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, don't be afraid to correct people. I mean, Sid and I were on a live and we were literally talking about how there were 3 Hurley stages and somebody kept coming back and saying,
She's like, I'm stage 4.
yeah, she would say, I'm stage 4. Yeah, exactly. So there really are, and you can be a severe stage 3. Absolutely. But there's only 3 Hurley. Yeah.
And Brinley, I mean, I know she's actually very busy. But I, for one, I have a phone number, so I'm like, is this okay? Is this okay? And I always joke because I'm like, no, my stuff is Brinley approved. She knows what she's talking about. So even if you just like, if you want to shoot it to me because you feel like she's too busy for you or whatever, I'll be like, hey, so wants to know if this is okay.
Yeah, and you guys are free to text me. Like I'm happy to respond and let you know, if you have questions, please do. And I would highly recommend that you check out like our article section on HS Connect. We're working on next year we're trying to, because this year's busy. Next year we want to do more like in the way of videos and YouTubes of like kind of talking about the articles that we have. But we have like 70 plus articles on our site that were written by my co-founder mainly, and there is a plethora of information. Like, did you know that those 2 little black heady things that come up are? Yeah. 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 It's usually the first sign of HS. They're DEPs is what they're called, but they're like double-ended pseudocombs. Yeah. Yeah. So they're like HS's best friend, basically. Yeah. They're like partners in crime. So we have like an entire article about that. Yeah. So there's so much information to be had there. There's pretty much an article on everything.
Different from just like having HS and then Hurley stage. Like, I don't get the Hurley part.
So the Hurley is how bad your HS is. That's how it's used. So it's if you're stage 1, then you have abscesses or nodules that are individual and not connecting at all. Most of the time they will still scar, even if, like, for me, it wasn't as bad as Caitlin, my younger daughter. When her abscesses come up, they usually don't drain, but they'll still leave a scar, which that in and of itself is like a testament to how much inflammation and damage is being done on the inside of your body when it will still leave a scar without even breaking the skin. But so the Hurley stage 1 is like individual abscesses and nodules, not connecting, not tunneling, still potentially leaving scarring. And then stage 2 is when there's more activity and there's the beginning of tunneling between the two. So like Dr. Goldberg was talking about the house fire. I kind of equate it to like a street with alleys, like a housing community, and these are all of like the streets that are being built underneath.
It's just to that put in front, like it doesn't change the fact, like if somebody's like, I have stage 2, I have Hurley stage 2.
Yeah, you don't have to say Hurley. Yeah, who invented it. Yeah. Yeah. And then stage 3 is a really affected area. It basically goes by how much skin is affected or unaffected, excuse me, in between the abscesses is kind of how it
And
works.
it can be different in different.
Yes.
Like you be stage 1 on your underarms to stage 3 on the butt cheeks.
You go by the
Yeah.
one that's the most severe.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so you can just say stage 2, you don't have to say Hurley stage. Yep.
I'm stage 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. I got them all. Check, check, check. Okay, so let's talk about triggers because I think this is another area that we really need help on changing the narrative in the community. Like you guys said, they talk about things in absolutes, right? Surgery. I think surgery is amazing. It's totally changed my life. I would do it again in a heartbeat. I have 7 other times. But surgery doesn't work for everyone. It's not everyone's answer. So I can't go out there and say, no, you need to have surgery. No, you don't need to do anything. This is what worked for me. So it's the same thing a lot. And Christina and Shannon, you guys know with food, that it's a hot ass topic that people are all over this constantly. And it works for some people and it doesn't for others. Food is not a trigger for me. So when I'm constantly told that like I should be vegan or whatever, I'm like, that's not for me. My triggers are completely different. So HS is so different for everyone that we really have to make sure that when we're talking about triggers that we're identifying that the triggers are different for different people and what works for one may or will not work for another. And that's really important to keep your journey focused on what's worked for you, and not kind of make people feel pushed to do what is working for you. Exactly. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that. That would probably be a Dave Louie question. But if you email me, I can get an answer. Okay, so see, I told you we had a slide with Dr. Googles. So trusted resources. Okay, Dr. Googles is all wrong. And some of this is, you guys, we have so much work to do and I don't know where to start to change it. I have worked with the HS Foundation on the AAD's website and we're trying to work on changing that. Since that's the American Academy of Dermatology and, you know, they're supposedly the gold star for derm. I hope you hear this and let's execute this change a little quickly. And then, so not Google, obviously. I don't know where that information comes from. Not the AAD, not even the Mayo Clinic. Like, this is something that's on our agenda to change. It's just a lot of work. But this is how we start changing. And then HS Connect, yes. I mean, we have a medical advisory board. The VP of my board is Adam Friedman from GW. I mean, I'm working with these guys constantly. I implicitly trust them. I work with all of the top HS specialists, and have most of them in my phone. So, we take our education and advocacy very, very seriously. So our goal is not to lead people astray. It's to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. Oops, I went backwards. So my goal is for you to go forward, my young ones, and use your influence to move HS in the right direction. Take what you've learned, ask more questions. I would love to do set up a follow-up session that we can do on Zoom with Dr. Dave Louie and Dr. Goldberg, who are some of the most giving people I've ever met in my life. Seriously. The doctors that we have working in the forefront on HS are the most amazing people I have never seen a group so dedicated to a disease in my life. And like you can see Dr. Dave Louie and Dr. Goldberg's eyes like just light up when they talk about it. That's what the entire group is like, including the peds derms that we work with. So I just want you to know there's a huge team behind us that is working so hard on figuring out how this works for us and how we can change the world so that people are not suffering the way we have.